Hello, everyone, and welcome to this UCL lunchtime lecture on justice between generations. My name is Rachel Rosen, and I'm a professor of sociology here at UCL. My research focuses on marginalized children and families, particularly those with precarious migration status, and focuses on questions of childhood displacement and racialized border regimes. But we're here today not to hear from me. It's really my honor and pleasure to introduce you to today's speaker, Professor Emerita Priscilla Alderson. Priscilla Alderson is a wonderful colleague. She's a professor emerita, as I said, of childhood studies, and she joined the Institute of Education in 1991. With colleagues, she has researched on over 40 projects and written over an astounding 300 publications, mainly on children's rights and agency in their healthcare and education, and on research ethics. She also has convened doctoral seminars on critical realism between 2014 and 2020, and has 10 sessions of those on YouTube. Before we begin her lecture, though, I wanted to let you know we'll have some time at the end of the lecture for questions. These can be submitted at any point during the talk by going to Slido through your internet browser and entering the event code #generations. But now it's my absolute pleasure to hand over to Priscilla for her talk, Justice Between Generations.
Thank you very much, Rachel, and hello everyone. I hope you find the lecture useful. I'm going to talk about inequality between older and younger generations, which is rapidly increasing in many ways. And I want to talk about critical realism, a philosophy of the natural and social sciences that helps to explain these processes. A co-founder of critical realism, Roy Basker, worked at the Institute of Education for 7 years. And a key concept in critical realism is dialectic. That works through 4 stages to search for truth. There starts with the search for knowledge and absences, intervening to negate negations to solve problems, looking for totality and the larger picture, and then changing our inner being. And I'm going to explain why these 4 stages are important. Now, dialectic, I think it's one of the most useful of research concepts. It's the interaction of different, separate beings. Do rivers shape landscapes or landscapes shape rivers? Well, they continually interact in a dialectic in time and space. Land and water remain different, but they work together in a kind of unity, not merged together like salty water that loses both the properties, and they keep changing the world. Why does the 4-stage dialectic matter? Well, many people start and get stuck at stage 2, intervene to negate negations. So, dealing with immigrants, Donald Trump will say, build the wall. Keir Starmer will say, stop the boats, smash the gangs. It doesn't work. Build more wall, stop more boats, smash more gangs. That doesn't work. But they still keep repeating. In the useful 4-stage dialectic, first of all, there's the search for often unseen causes, absences beyond evidence. Why do people migrate? War and other violence, danger from government that might imprison and torture you, floods, droughts, hunger, conflict. Many so-called illegal refugees' entry is approved after they arrive. They can stay here by right. So with greater understanding from stage 1, move on to stage 2, intervene, but this time respond to causes. Why not set up legal routes into the UK? Then there's less need for small boats and smugglers. Many lives, millions of pounds will be saved. If we did have a better working system, we would also take account of the greater global picture. There are many complex arguments through this PowerPoint I'm putting here very briefly, just to spark ideas in your minds and connect things that you already know. There's climate chaos, of course, with heat, floods, droughts and famine. Fires that will force billions of people to migrate in the coming years. We need to prepare and prevent. UK services depend on migrants. 1 in 5 NHS staff and care workers do not have British citizenship. If we had good jobs and housing for everyone, that would help to stop anti-immigrant anger, and there could be more peace and justice for all. So that's the bigger picture changing. But then stage 4 of the dialectic, if we are going to have change, we all have to change our inner being, our hopes, our fears, our values, taking account of great realities. Critical realism is also concerned with concrete utopianism, concrete meaning real, and plastic, adaptable, flexible, and utopianism meaning the good world of peace and justice and prosperity for everyone. Now, the former dialectic was 3-stage: thesis, the idea; antithesis, opposite, critical ideas; and then synthesis, drawing everything together in a new whole. But there's no close synthesis to critical realist dialectic because cycles are all emergent, open-ended, changing. We get to one stage, but then we have to look forward to the next. We need research that tracks and connects things over time, learns from past experiences and absences, reapplies knowledge gained, and acknowledges values inherent in research, seeing that positivist neutral objectivity, value freedom, masks power and interest and is stuck in the status quo. Arguably, we cannot be value free. Everything is loaded with values. Now, how do we care for children and young people in England? Well, 1 in 5 working adults lives in poverty, 1 in 6 retired people, but double that, 1 in 3 children lives in poverty. 3 million children miss meals. 1 million have no proper bed. 2 million have no cooker or washing machine. They can't afford enough school uniform. And they're in trouble for all these things, being tired and hungry and not wearing the right clothes. Many, many children never go on holiday. Instead, during school holidays, holiday prices go up. They go down during school terms so that old people take plenty of holidays a year. Tens of thousands of playgrounds and youth clubs are being closed in recent years. Many families rely on cheap junk food, and there are soaring obesity rates. 1 in 3 young people report mental health problems, a higher rate than any other age group. Suicide is the leading cause of death for people aged 5 to 35 in England. And of all the 40 richest countries in the world, the UK has the greatest rise in child poverty. There's a great pressuring down and blaming children. So at the top in the education system, we have international league tables and PISA, pressuring government ministers to compete with other countries. They pressure the civil service and Ofsted, who bully head teachers and leadership teams, who bully teachers, assistants and parents, who all of them crush down on school students because everything depends on the scores the students achieve, the work they do. In this pyramid of bullying. So a minister says in Parliament, I will improve schools. What she means is the children will have to raise higher scores during their exams. A very harsh, cruel system means that there are more police and military in our schools. More and more is being spent on them. And schools need to be harsh to train future police and prison officers, bailiffs and other officials. Social workers and health visitors used to be supportive of families in need, but now they tend to police them, to check which families they need to remove the children from. So there's this devolving of blame down onto children. For example, adults promote pornography and addictive gambling on the internet and smartphones. It's children who are punished for watching it. Schools have long, boring, irrelevant lessons. Children must not protest. There's dangers and crime on the disorganized streets that adults are responsible for. So mothers say, oh, in the holidays, I have to stay at home all day with my 13-year-old. Do 13-year-olds want to stay at home all day? Why can't they go out and have adventurous lives? But friendship groups are too often seen as dangerous gangs. Youths carry knives in self-defense. And smartphones trap families into constant surveillance that's unthinkable 10, 20, 30 years ago. Adults now think parents, they must know where their child is all the time. Now, the highest cause of young people's depression is schools. It's found in surveys. Scores, grades, failures, punishments, exclusions. I recently homeschooled my granddaughter for 18 months in age 13, and we did the Pearson set text in 6 different lesson subjects. And Pearson's, of course, earn billions with their set textbooks, lessons, and exams. It's very highly questionable whether we want our children to learn these agendas set by billionaires. Too many books are being banned from schools because they're too adventurous and questioning. Libraries are being closed and lost to schools. Phonics means that where once young children read really imaginative, small vocabulary, early reading books with lovely characters, illustrations, and stories, now they're often given nonsense books and just concentration on the phonics sound. Powerful knowledge, great scientific theorems, has crowded out the arts and the sports and all the exciting, adventurous kinds of learning in schools now. And too often now we have growing AI, mechanical, and not interpersonal learning systems. And yet 7-year-olds can work together to resolve bullying and behaviour problems and organise elections in their schools. They stand for being officers for things. They understand politics and elections if they're taught. They have great understanding when they're taught and trusted. Children are far more competent than school systems allow. So why do most schools crush children's agency? Well, it's part of the K-shaped economics. In the upward stroke of the K, the rich get richer in dialectics. In the down stroke of the K, the poor get poorer, again in dialectics. So, for example, the wealth dialectic. The 50 richest UK families have more wealth than 50% of the UK population. The rich rely on education, culture, networks, and assets. They, in stage 3, the larger picture of the dialectic, the richest 1% in the world own almost half of all the wealth in the whole world. And 50 billionaires emit more carbon dioxide in 90 minutes than the average person does in a lifetime. Wealth keeps multiplying. So for stage 4 of the dialectic, in a being, the more wealth and power they have, the more they need. They compare themselves with people above and below them. And so it goes round to the beginning of the dialectic again. And each year, wealth is concentrated among fewer and fewer people. And so there's the poverty dialectic. Poverty involves poor health, housing, and education, stress, insecurity, anxiety, shame, and isolation. So in the system, the negations, poor children are most likely to be excluded from school, have to move, be evicted from their homes, and so on. So that instead of resolving their problems are trebled and multiplied. Stage 3, poor people's debts and rents and living costs keep rising and rising. Stage 4, poor people are even less able to cope with the problems globally. And so that goes back to the beginning, and each time the cycle intensifies. And then there's the climate change dialectic of rising CO2 emissions leading to warmer air. And that leads, within the visible evidence, more floods and droughts, storms, fires, more ecocide and famine, all of them badly affecting one another. In the global picture, they increase the heat, hunger, poverty, migration, and conflicts over, and nearly all wars are fought over land, water, and oil, I should have said there. And so back to stage 4, inner being, our conscience, our values. But world leaders' habits and policies increase CO2 emissions. So it goes back to 1 again in the intensifying cycles. So change and research must be ecological, ethical, economic, and existential. We have to draw all these different things together to understand and affect them. Now, I'm going to complain a lot about the oldest generations, and I must confess that I was born in 1945, so that I'm speaking of my generation. And we in the rich countries are the most fortunate people ever in history. Our benefits are multiplied. We've had peace in Europe. The United Nations started in 45. The rules-based world order. There was a nuclear proliferation treaty that stopped nuclear arms multiplying. There was respect for human rights and the UN conventions. We had the UK welfare state. The NHS started in 1948. There have been ample benefits, pensions, very generous for my generation, housing. We've had longer, healthier lives. There's been growing national wealth and industry. There were strong trade unions, free college and university places. And since 1945, most households have come to have luxuries we take for granted today: fridges, televisions, Wi-Fi. Women's lives have been transformed by growing gender equality and employment. However, intergenerational justice today, the United Nations and the world order is being destroyed. Governments are not acting on the dangers of climate change and pollution, weather dangers, land erosion, and so on. All these extremely urgent and serious problems are being really neglected. Famines, always human-made, increase popular unrest with violence and dispute. In Sudan, Yemen, and Palestine, almost half the people are aged under 19 years. In the Democratic Republic of the Congo, the median age is nearly under 16. And so there are wars now on civilians in populated areas, not on empty battlefields. And no wonder children are among the highest casualties. So with intergenerational justice, there's the rise of the far right and anti-immigration policies, huge rearming that divests funding from welfare to warfare. Wealth is moved to the oldest groups, and the younger adults face unemployment, low pay, student loan debts, lack of housing. And of course, your most expensive years are when you are young families and looking after children who are growing up. That's when the most income is needed, not old retired people. Houses are seen as assets, not loans, in the move of financialization, privatization to financial deregulation to capital account liberalization. Money rules. Since the 1970s, each successive generation is saddled with higher costs, lower wages, and more debt. And the international crisis is far worse. With the global food system as fragile as the global bank system, it could crash so easily because hedge funds underpay farmers for their crops months before harvest. They buy up the crops. The crops might be worth far more than the payments, or they might fail. It's a gamble. Farms and companies, if the crops fail, collapse and are taken over. Fewer and fewer giant companies now control world food. Only 50 main global foods are used now. And yet, because there's less we need great diversity and variety to cope with the changes in the climate. George Monbiot has pointed out 5 things. There is less diversity, variety, immunity of crops and animals, locality, locally sourced food, and stored food for times of famine. We're failing on all those 5 crucial ways for food safety. Monbiot has also pointed out that the Gulf Stream drift that maintains a fairly constant temperature around north and south may fail, with catastrophic climate events nearly upon us. And now, on the 22nd of May, will be Earth Overshoot Day, when we will have used up all the food and resources that we need for the whole year. And we will be using forests, biodiversity, carbon emissions, and so on, that we will be stealing from the future. So how can we explain the present processes and the madness that could lead so easily to the end of humanity? We must look beyond the obvious. How does power and wealth flow around the world? We need critical, reflexive, interdisciplinary research to understand it. One thing is to look at education and the world rulers. And for centuries, there's been boarding school syndrome, when the wealthy young boys were sent off to boarding school, like Donald Trump, Boris Johnson, Tony Blair, David Lammy, politicians, King Charles, Rupert Soames, who ran Serco, a multi-billion, very exploitative company. And he's just typical of billionaires around the world running the great companies. He's Winston Churchill's grandson. These men were harmed by their schools and trained to harm others, to run big empires, colonies, the military, the civil service, big business, the judiciary, mass media, all shaped to favour the few and suppress the many. So boarding schools taught them unquestioning loyalty to their systems, to school, their team, king and country. And they were partly looked after by servants and boarding schools to stop emotional attachment. They had to be trained up to have arranged, loveless marriages for property and power, and to see family love as something shameful, an impediment. Little boys of 7 and 8 who cried when they left home at boarding school were taught to be very ashamed and silent about that. There are also, for the state schools, different kinds of repressions. So in preschools, children as young as 3 and 4 explain that it's like a baby jail. There's no escape. Strict regimes, rules, timing, and pressure to follow these routines. Yes, there are many good staff, but there are racist systems where young, especially young black boys, are picked out very early on as naughty. Preschool is a pipeline to prison for them. There's less and less free, adventurous outdoor time. And instead it's, oh, careful, you'll fall and hurt yourself. It's raining, come in and you'll catch cold. So children lay out an elaborate game and tidy up time, quick, quick. There are long queues and waits. Protest is punished. At school, a local teacher said half her reception class is still in nappies and can't use knives and forks. So what are children learning in their first 4 years, their precious first 4 years? And then when they get to school, there are streaming and bottom set citizens, the very good book by Paula Ambrosi. Trump and Farage were both in bottom sets. And you can imagine them as naughty boys winding up the teachers and making the class laugh, can't you? Full of rage and laughter. They know how to appeal to their peers, millions of people who are also put into bottom sets and feel rejected, humiliated and angry. There's no strong evidence that setting and streaming improve overall outcomes. and millions of people feel angry and wrongly rejected failures. So there's this constant living dialectic of history and today, of people being put into bottom sets, growing up into adults, their children being put into bottom sets, and so on. We must look at how past and present, political economies, education, all kinds of systems and little dialectics and big dialectics going on throughout the nation shape the absent, unknown future, our dreams, and how we research them. So critical realism asks, what is the cause, for example, of famine? And empirical researchers would do interviews, surveys, videos about people's experiences and views, the meaning they give to famine. Very important. The actual research with positivist quantitative research would observe the actions and events, measure the weather, the crops, the food trade, deliveries, costs, number of people involved. Again, vital to know. But critical realism had, we must look at the real, what is causing famines. There are physical and political causes, motives, and intentions. Famine is always man-made, and we can see that the famine in Gaza has been created. Gaza is in the Fertile Crescent. And so that along with the usual empirical and actual, the positivist research and the interpretive research, we need critical realism to look at the politics. So is the future being sold, being thrown away, like Donald Trump in his pram, throwing out his toys? He's my age. He's going to be 80 this year. So the younger generations, they're almost being tossed out of the pram. They don't matter. They're worthless. Now, it's interesting that Donald Trump is there depicted as a baby, though nothing could be less like a baby than Donald Trump. And we need to have a third of three vital words. So sexism wasn't actually coined until 1968. And of course, we have feminism, and we need those two words to identify great wrongs and be able to act against them. Racism wasn't coined until 1936. And of course, we need anti-racism. And before sexism and racism were accepted and acknowledged, it was often thought of as natural, normal, necessary, and nice to be sexist. Of course, all men are sexist. We have to be. Poor women, we need them. They need to be controlled and organised. It's nice of men to bother with them. But we still think that adultism, adult-centrism, is natural, normal, necessary, and nice. Of course, adults have to be in charge. And we don't yet use the word childism, which, like sexism and racism, identifies a massive discrimination against 1/3 of the people in the world, children and young people. Now, what kinds of citizens do societies need? If we are to promote liberty, equality, and solidarity, once called fraternity, brotherly love, surely we need people who are loving and trusting, curious, generous, kind, and friendly. We need people who are not prejudiced, who are confident and creative, who are adventurous but careful risk takers, who are intense questioners and who concentrate critically, who are passionate about exploring and learning and have a strong sense of justice. Where are we going to find these wonderful people who could bring such great societies? Babies are like that. They are born with all these traits because humans needed these kinds of traits to enable us to survive and evolve. I hope you've seen the wonderful TED talk, Babies Think Like Butterflies. Adults think like caterpillars in grooves. We learn more in our first 4 years than in the rest of our lives. At first, all self-taught because nobody can explain things to us before we can use words. When watching puppet shows, babies at 3 months, and certainly at 6 months, when they see puppets being unkind, are shocked. And this shows their innate sense of justice. When they start to talk, among their favourite words are why and it's not fair. And so there's so much wisdom and compassion among children and young people, confidence and creativity. There's Archie, the youngest beekeeper in Britain, certified beekeeper, aged 5. And there's Colby, riding in the European Motorbike Championships, age 7. We could learn, if every child in the world had their opportunities, what would the world be like? And so we need to work towards societies that are planned and run by and with children and adults. We need world peace, inclusive schools, secure housing, green neighbourhoods, and walkable cities. We need part-time school and work so that adults and children can enjoy together many extra activities and resources. Sports, arts, music, libraries, labs, workshops, kitchens, gardens, animals. If we had a citizen income for everyone, they would have time to do this. We could promote non-profits, cooperatives, and community work rather than big business creaming off massive profits. We could take account of the Care Manifesto and think that care is as important as peace and justice. That's the end of my talk. I've put some of the references at the end. And I don't know if you need me to show the special slide.
Yeah.
There's the Slido. Yes.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Priscilla, for a really invigorating talk and a kind of call to action in terms of thinking about how we move towards justice between generations, but I think also in terms of some of the other points you've raised, which is about justice between sort of more in terms of the distribution of wealth, in terms of justice for migrants and so forth. So thank you very, very much. For everybody who's here and listening, there's a QR code that you can see on your screen. If you use this, it will take you directly to a Slido on your internet browser where you can put in questions for Priscilla, which I'll then share with her for the remaining time. You'll need to use the hashtag generations in order to get into the Slido. So just while people are having a think about this, Priscilla, maybe we could start off with you just saying a little bit about reflecting on the drives towards inequality, the inequality that exists and what seems to be increasing, and how we might be able to reverse some of these present drives.
Yes, well, I think we have to look back to the cause of all these things and start at the beginning. How are babies and little children treated? How are they separated, or how are they encouraged to keep their unprejudiced initial behaviors, values, attitudes? My son looked rather obviously disabled, but when he turned up at preschool when at age 3, none of the children were bothered about that. They just saw him as another boy. We learn racism, disableism, prejudices, don't we? Sexism. These are all taught. Greed is taught very, very early on. And babies, there's many of them, if they're lucky enough, or in a way, are smothered with presents, rewarded with toys, aren't they? Instead of thinking about how can we live more naturally, and actually thinking back more to indigenous people who survived for thousands and thousands of years without wars, in close communities. Have we got a lot to learn from them? There's a lovely book, The Continuum Concept. Have you heard of it, Rachel? It's a woman went to South America to look for diamonds and found an indigenous community and lived there. And she watched the mothers being pregnant for 9 months and then holding their babies for 9 months, along with the fathers and the friends and the siblings. The babies were more or less held and carried around for 9 months. And then the babies sort of more or less crawled off independently and coped with fires, knives, little cliffs, all sorts of things, because it seems they'd learnt while they were being carried around. And they had such knowledge and this trusting and adventurousness and freedom. I mean, looking back to what's been lost, I look at my grandchildren, my children, my childhood. Uh, you just can't compare them. We had such freedom and independence.
Thank you, Priscilla. Just again to welcome everyone who's here to add your questions to the Slido, and we'll take them up in the conversation. But just to sort of follow up on some of what you were saying, Priscilla, I mean, I think there's an interesting point around the way that childhood has shifted and changed so much historically that you're describing. But also, I think there's something about the kind of inequalities between countries. So you've said something about looking towards, I guess, from our position, you and I are both in the UK, looking from our position towards what we can learn about childhoods elsewhere. Is there also something that we need to do in terms of looking to what our own country is doing in terms of the kind of global situations and scene that you've been talking about?
Oh, yes, definitely. Thank you for raising it, Rachel. There's just so much to try and pack into this, but good for expanding it because it's absolutely vital, isn't it? Yesterday, I was reading that the slave, there's a lot of talk about reparations for slavery. The slave enslaving countries kept all the money they'd made from the slaves. None went back to the slaves then. But what's more important, the money that they kept from South America, the Caribbean, and Asia and Africa, all that money flowed back to Britain. And so the great privileges I spoke of from 1945, the welfare state, the NHS, all of that was really built on slave money. And apparently, India was once the richest country in the world. And we went there and we stole 70% of the wealth of India. Um, we still, and the point made was that this continues in this dialectical cycle. It's repeated year after year after year. We don't make the repayments. We're all benefiting from that income over the centuries that continues today. And with climate change and global injustice, the amount of suffering, hunger, poverty is escalating. And don't you think, Rachel, that we'll soon expect, it might be in 2, 3, 30 decades or more, billions of people needing to migrate because their land will be uninhabitable. Do you agree?
Yeah, I think that's right. We're already seeing a lot of what people sometimes refer to as climate refugees. So whether it's flooding or drought, which, as you say, are human-made conditions quite often, that these are forcing people to migrate and move in order to survive. So yeah, I think you're right. It's really important how you're tying together these different pieces around climate, so human action and political economy. I'm really curious to kind of follow up on one of the points that you made earlier. So bringing some of these high level discussions into what you said about children and adults working together for the betterment of society. And I think sometimes people have a hard time imagining what that would mean if children were actually to be involved with these sorts of big questions. Because as you pointed out, children are so often kind of evicted from the political sphere, from the polis. So what can you tell us a little bit about what you would imagine that could look like?
Yes, well, in the part, in not all that long ago, a few centuries ago, children had a short infancy and then more or less joined the adult world. So, and certainly adolescence is said to have been invented in 1904 by this massive book about adolescence and hormones. Um, they were given adult responsibilities and did a lot of adult work and shared. And of course, lots of people died very young, so you had to live your life quickly and early, usually too. But the other main thing about the sorry, can you say the question again, Rachel? The
It's really about
um,
children and adults working together. And I
Oh
think
yeah,
there's
working
actually been
together.
a
Oh yes, I've remembered that. Well, I did research into primary schools, and one was a mayhem school. The head teacher resigned in despair. Windows were broken and all this sort of thing. So a new head came, and she decided to turn the school around with the children, so that all the children had responsibilities. And there were roles like bully busters and guardian angels, so that if a child seemed to be unhappy or lonely or being bullied, the children would fly to the rescue and sort things out. They learned peacemaking and negotiation. They had elections, of course, and they stood for all the different posts, like being the book. They made the school rules. They were sensible rules like don't throw the books about. In those days, because it was about 30 years ago, lots of schools, thankfully, didn't have uniform or didn't bother about them much. You didn't have to wear them. And so they were free of all that nonsense. Um, so the relations with the staff and the children were more equal. There was much less fussing and rule keeping. But there was this idea that the children could grow into spaces that are seen as adult. And I wrote a book with the school um, in the words of the children and the teachers, and with a committee of children. Uh, it's called Learning Highfield School, that one. And then the other school I was in was in Newham in London, a very inclusive borough. They closed nearly all the special schools except for two and brought the special staff and resources and money into the mainstream schools. And they had things like soft play areas and sensory rooms and so on, long before most schools had them. And so this book that I wrote with the school is called Learning and Inclusion. And it's about how in every possible way, everyone in the school worked to be inclusive. And actually, inclusion is often a kind of a dreadful word that covers over lots of things. It doesn't mean much. But this, they really meant it. 10% of the children in the school have profound and multiple disabilities. And during the school assemblies, for example, everybody from 3 to 11 came into the room. Most of the children sat on the floor. Some staff would carry some children in. And I used to think it was a mixture between a kind of football match and a rave. And the head teacher would say, right, we're going to sing this hymn. And everybody would sing it really loudly, shouting out. And then she said, now we're going to whisper. And they would sing the next verse really, really quietly. I mean, goodness, there was such an amazing spirit in that school. If only every school could be that like that, because as soon as children did something wrong, it was immediately they were thinking, what's the problem? What's the matter? Not you're naughty, you're bad, we've got to punish you. And really, in all the schools that are punishing and excluding, the adults are not behaving like grown-ups, sensible, rational, calm, positive, creative people, because I'm sure lots of them want to be, but the system stops them. And every year, I think schools have got more and more repressive, run by in capitalist ways instead of socialist ways.
Great. Thank you, Priscilla. I wanted to move on to one of the questions from our audience
Oh,
today,
good.
a
Yeah.
question by Ava Katarina Boser. Ava asks, how can we promote solidarity between generations in the UK? And would it promote more justice between generations?
Well, I definitely hope it will promote more justice. How can we promote more solidarity between generations? Well, I think, again, starting with the very start, as in Finland, I would give mothers and fathers well-paid baby leave, not maternity leave, baby leave, for the first year at least of the child's life. And when they're reasonably paid, then mothers and fathers can afford to go out and meet others and enjoy swimming and walking and coffee and all sorts of things together in groups. So it's absolutely crucial that we look at housing and how it's built for communities, how streets are safe and welcoming and inclusive, how everybody of all ages is welcome onto the streets. Um, and I'd reopen all the youth clubs and everything, but I'd also have more all age clubs, darts, snooker, whatever, with the idea that we mix them, because in schools, I've never got over this age grouping in schools every year. I'm always a bit intimidated by people I think are older than me, and I'm always a bit kind of, do they mind me talking to them if they seem younger than me? It's ridiculous, isn't it? But it's deep into your subconscious. So I would have adults coming back to school to learn in the classes when they want to know more history or geography. Because if you have more adults mixed with the children, again, that would help with the behaviour problems. But then I would make schools much more voluntary, because when children can opt in and vote to go to the most popular teachers, then all the teachers have to work to be popular, don't they? And then that would help to equate children's judgment and choice would be taken more seriously. I think there are countless ways in which we could look at our daily lives, the details of them, and think that could be more all age inclusive. We could change it round. We could think of a completely different dialectic. But I think critical realism would be very, very helpful here to think of, why is there this difference? How is it being exhibited? What's the bigger picture? What do I have to change in my own thinking and values if we're going to have real positive practical change and political change?
Wonderful. Thank you, Priscilla. I just want to pick up on Kester Mueller has asked about whether there's any particular UK schools that you have caught your interest, which are trialing radical children's rights approaches. And I think you've already told us a little bit about with some examples. So maybe what you could do is take it a step farther, just in a couple of minutes, say what you would imagine a sort of radical children's rights approach might look like.
Well, I heard of a school which I haven't followed up, somewhere I think towards the northwest of England, where it's run on love and they don't have any punishments at all, a primary school. Now, if that school could do it, I wish somebody would go and research it and publicize it and help everybody else to do it. But to do it, we would have to get rid of Ofsted, because Ofsted really punishes inclusion. When it rates schools on your exam scores, of course, you're going to try and get rid of the less academic, not necessarily the less clever, creative, talented children, just the less academic, because that's what schools are geared for, so that everyone else risks being seen as a failure and being failed by the system. So again, taking children's views of schools far, far more serious. They are the experts, not the parents or the teachers, actually. The children know what impact it's all having on them.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Priscilla. This has been a really generative conversation. And thank you to everybody in the audience for your really stimulating questions. I mean, I think one of the things that you've ended on nicely for us, Priscilla, is this idea about the need for solidarity between generations in order to achieve justice for generations, justice between generations, and that love is a crucial part of that. Love is a kind of collective, or solidarity is the collective expression of love. So I really appreciate everyone being here today and for the really,
Rachel, could I just ask
yes.
something? If there are any other questions, if you'd like to send them to me, maybe I could do an email response to them if there are. Yeah.
Wonderful. Okay, so there's an invitation to everyone there. If you have follow-up questions from the talk today, you can email directly Priscilla Alderson, who you can find on the UCL website. And just to then close off our session today, the UCL programming team have asked me to let you know that this is UCL's bicentenary year, and there are several ways to get involved should you wish to. So they've asked me to say you can book a place on the UCL 200 walking tour, discover the full program through the UCL 200 events calendar, and visit the UCL 200 exhibition, which is running throughout the year. And this is all available on the UCL 200 web pages. And finally, just to invite you to our next lunchtime lecture at UCL. There's a whole host of exciting lectures, but the next one is on the 26th of May, and it's called The First Stars, Galaxies and Black Holes. We look forward to seeing you there. Thank you again to all.